computer and we'll get started. So I want to say hello and welcome to Christine Buckley, who is, I think I showed this before, the author of Plant Magic, as well as being a community-based herbologist. We're very excited for this Herbalism in Real Life. If I didn't say already, my name is Linda Maiko. I want to thank you all for attending this evening. As we get through this, I am going to mute everybody for the beginning of it while Christine talks and she goes through and she explains some things. And she actually has two different types of treatments or recipes, I should say, that she's going to show to us. And at the end, we'll open it up for a question and answer. You could, unmute yourselves at that point and ask us yourself, or if you put anything in the chat, I will be monitoring the chat and I will make sure that I ask your questions in the chat. So having said that, I am now going to mute. Let's see, I'm going to mute everybody except for Christine, and I'm going to mute myself in about 2 more seconds. I think we are all good.
Okay, it's my turn. Thanks, Linda. I'm so happy to be here with everyone, and thanks everyone for coming on this November Eve. No, it's December. Oh my God, it's December now. I'll just tell you like a little bit about me and where I am right now so that you have an idea of who I am. This is my cat, Zizi. For some reason, she just wants me to hold her right now. I currently live in South Central Florida. I moved here about 3 weeks ago, but I was born in Bergen County. My family lived in Glen Rock till I was 9. And I've lived all over the United States. So I know that many of the plants in my book can be found and grown almost everywhere. And I think that's important to remember when you start herbalism, that you can bring your favorite plants with you no matter where you are. And so I work as a community herbalist. I help people think about how food and medicinal herbs can support emotional and physical health. I teach classes and I work with people one-on-one, and I write articles for a popular audience on the internet. I'm gonna put her down now. So I'll talk a little bit about what herbalism is, and the definition that I like to use is a system of care shaped by our needs and fulfilled by the land. People have been working with plants for a really long time. Since we became humans, we've evolved alongside of them, and we depend on them for the air we breathe, the fuel we burn to heat our homes, which for a long time were made completely from plants. And they feed and soothe us in times of need. Our modern biomedicine model is relatively new. It mostly took a really firm hold after the Flexner Report was published in the 1910s, which was funded by the Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundations. And prior to that point, there were a lot of different ways in the United States that people practiced systems of care. There have always been systems of care within communities all over the world, whether your people come from Africa or parts of Asia or parts of Europe, or whether you're indigenous to the United States. Each of these communities have developed ways to engage with the plants around them in order to support good health and to feed themselves. And so at the early part of the 20th century, there was all of this activity going on around health. There were many ways that we could take care of one another. Much of it was done in a communal setting by experts in the community that people look to for methods of healing and for basically, the analog to pharmaceutical drugs, which would have been plants. But after...
Just one little quick question. I did get one in the chat. What was the name of the survey again before we go on?
Oh, the report?
Yeah.
It's called the Flexner Report, authored by Abraham Flexner and some other people, published in 1910. And that really set strict parameters for how medical education could happen in the country. So as a consequence, like a lot of traditional systems of care kind of went underground. But it's always been there. And it's evident in the recipes that are handed down within our families, and also in the plants that we see in our grocery stores. The reason that chamomile and clove and cinnamon and parsley and carrot root are still around is because we really need them to survive. We need them to be nourished, and we also need them in order to have the best emotional and physical health. So herbalism is a system of care that anyone can do. Chances are you're probably already doing it. If you drink tea, or you make broth, or you eat seasonally, or you share food with people you love, you're really already doing herbalism. And then Linda used this really great phrase when we were talking, saying that she's herb curious. Is that what we said? Herbal curious?
Herbal curious. I'm very herbal curious.
Yeah.
I cook a lot with herbs, and I want to know what, you kind of know what you're doing, but you don't really.
Yeah, I think, so one of the first things we do when we start practicing herbalism is to just pay a little bit more attention to how we feel, how the people around us are responding, to how they're feeling, and to us, and then also to how the foods and drinks we put in our body shift our experience within our body and mind. There's a goal in herbalism to help the organism maintain balance. And what that means is that we're constantly responding to signals from the environment and from our bodies. And the way that we're able to do that is by using our senses. We're all equipped with what we need in order to be well. Most of the time, we just need a little bit more support. And so it's helpful to have plants to give us that support, and also helpful to have each other from whom to learn about what we need to do in order to shift imbalances in our body. So we look to our sense of smell, our sense of taste, touch, sight, and sound in order to help us understand how plants work within our body. And senses inform what we call in herbalism a system of energetics, which is a way that we detect imbalances in the body. Systems of energetics exist in lots of different practices of herbalism, whether it's Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine or different Native American practices, or Western herbalism, which is what the word that people use to describe a tradition that comes from Europe or Greco-Roman traditions. And so systems of energetics exist within each of these modalities, but the words are just used a little bit differently. But in traditional Western herbalism, which is the framework that I use in order to understand the body and the mind, we run on a spectrum of hot to cold, damp to dry, and tense to relaxed. So all of the experiences that we're having in our body can be described using these words and finding them on the spectrum. And then all of the plants that we use can also be found on these spectrums. And so then what we do is we match plants to how we're feeling in order to encourage a gentle shift. So often what happens is the shift occurs over time through small increments. And we can expect that the plants we'll need will change because how we respond to them and our needs will change. So really, to me, practicing herbalism, which is like a practice, like I am an herbalist, but I am by no means an expert. I am still learning all the time. If there, a mentor of mine uses a phrase, when you're green, you grow, when you're ripe, you rot. So in this space of constantly learning and practicing, we're able to acquire information and to really see shifts happen in ourselves and others. So I'm gonna have a sip of my water, which has elderberry syrup in it, which is in my book. I'm feeling a little sick this week, so elderberry is a great remedy for when you're actively sick. It can really help boost your immune system and fight any kind of virus that you might be having. So my favorite place to encourage people to start looking for herbalism is in their kitchens. I think we have more medicinal plants than we know. In fact, likely all of the herbs and spices that you have in your spice cabinet or your spice drawer or growing in little pots in your window are medicinal plants. Most of them are what's called carminative, which means they assist in digestion and specifically moving gas through our system. We eat lots of different kinds of food. It's common for our digestion to get upset. We have lots and lots of plants in our kitchens that aid in not only easing the discomforts of digestion, but also helping us to assimilate nutrients from the food that we eat. But then there are also plants. So carminatives would be like cinnamon, other warming spices like ginger and garlic. But then there are also lots of plants that do other things. And so two that I want to share with you today are quite common. Thyme. I have a little canister of dried thyme right here, and chamomile. And I used to think chamomile was so gross. I thought it was totally boring. And I often thought that it tasted like hay water. But then I realized that I just wasn't having good chamomile. Like most of the chamomile I was brewing was old. In general, you should look to replace your either like bulk teas or bulk herbs and spices, even in the jars, about every year, because things are just going to deteriorate over time. So one of my favorite things to do with old chamomile bags is to use them as eye packs instead of drinking the tea. Although I'll make the eye packs tonight and still drink them. So this is gonna be a little bit awkward because I'm gonna be like lifting up my computer to show you what's going on, but I think it'll work. So I have boiled a pot of water, which is on the stove. I used a, what's it called? Like a jarring pot, a pot for jarring things, for preserving. It's a large pot, and I filled it with about 3 inches of water. If you're going to do a thyme steam, which is what I'm going to show you how to do, you don't need to fill a big pot with a lot of water, but you do need a big pot in order to get a lot of steam, to have a lot of surface area. So it's good to use some kind of stock pot or a pasta pot, or a pot you might use for preserving. So I'm going to pick up my computer and show you what it looks like. This is the pot. You can see it's next to a kettle and a Le Creuset, so that's about the size that it is. And then I have a towel and I have my thyme. But since I've boiled the water, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone, which is I'm going to take warm water out of here to prepare the chamomile pack so that they'll be ready by the time I'm done doing the thyme steam. And this is a great thing to do together. Thyme steams have been a remedy I've relied on throughout the pandemic. They're supportive to our respiratory system. They keep our mucous membranes in our respiratory tract lubricated and healthy. And the volatile oils that are in thyme, which are oils that are not fatty, so they evaporate. That's where the smell comes from thyme. As soon as they meet the air, they evaporate. Those are really healing to our respiratory tract. And if we can, the better chance of getting them in deeper is through the steam. And the heat also helps to make an unfavorable environment to the spread of viruses. I'm by no means suggesting that a thyme steam is the remedy to COVID. Everyone, I hope, is wearing their masks and washing their hands and social distancing. But this is a remedy that I rely on often when I've been in possibly a space with a lot of people, or I've been outside and the air is cold. I come home and I make a thyme steam. It decreases the likelihood of viruses making a home, whatever kind of virus it may be. And it also is super soothing. I think it's important to remember that we're dealing with the physical effects of a virus right now, but also I think what's apparent at this point is the devastating emotional consequences of what we're all going through. So anytime we can make space to relax and to feel a deeper connection to the world in which we live beyond our human connection, it's going to make a huge difference to our nervous system. And our body is a web. how the amount of anxiety and stress we experience is going to influence our immune system, is going to influence how much work it can do when it meets an illness, regardless of what it is, whether it's a respiratory illness or food poisoning or stomach upset. The better chance we have at health and fighting the pathogen relies on the strength of our whole system. So integrating practices into our days. Do you have a question, Linda? Oh,
No, I was just going to say, it probably would also be good for allergies or something, or with the dust, like up here now in New Jersey, not you in Florida, but if you remember, the heat's kicking in.
yeah.
For a lot of us now too, the dry air is coming in, or the dust is starting to move. It sounds like this would be something that would be, and I suffer from allergies. I'm thinking this could be a good thing for allergies as well.
Totally. And also just if you know, when I lived in New York, all of the heating was radiator heat and it was super drying. And that's true of our house in New Jersey too. We had radiator heat. And even central air is super drying. So regardless of whether or not you think you've been exposed to anything, it's a really great thing to do for your respiratory system that's working overtime in this super dry environment. It's also really good for your face. It just has so many benefits, and it's easy, it's affordable, and it's something that you can do regardless of the age of people in your household. You are dealing with boiling water, but it's safe enough to do with children if you let it cool off enough, and if you're with them the whole time, supervising them. And the same thing with the Chamomile Eye Packs. So these are also things that you can take with you wherever you are. If you do change locations during the day to go, you know, work in a different space or wherever you might be, if you have to travel for any reason, it's easy enough to throw a couple packets of chamomile tea and a little bag of dried thyme into your DOP kit or your toiletries bag, and then take it with you if you're on the road. So let's see, is there anything else I want to say about this? I think I'll just show you how I do it. So I have the pot of water. I'm gonna, there, that's good. You can use dried thyme or you can use fresh thyme. If in general, when you're doing a thyme steam or you're making a tea or you're making a tincture, all of those methods are in my book. If you're like, I don't know what a tincture is, it's an alcohol extraction basically. But when you're using dried plants and replacing it with fresh plants, you're going to use more fresh material because there's more water in the fresh plant. So I've boiled the water, I turned it off, and I'm going to take off the lid. I don't know if you could just see, a bunch of steam came out. And I'm going to put a small handful of thyme in, probably like 2 tablespoons. If I were doing this with fresh thyme, I would use a bunch of thyme. And I would probably clip it up with some scissors before I dumped it in. I'm going to put this in. If you don't want to do it in the pot, if you want to set it up somewhere more relaxing, you can boil the water in a kettle and then put it carry it to a bowl in a place where you can sit. Just keep in mind that the bowl's going to get hot from the water. So this is like the safest way to do it, in my opinion. And I have a towel, just a bath towel. And I'm going to put my head over the steam like this. I'm about like 8 inches away from the pot. I can already feel the effects of the steam. The smell of the thyme is soothing. It's also slightly stimulating. So it's kind of a good thing to do in the evening if you finish your day and you're feeling a little bit sluggish, but you know, it's only 7 o'clock. I'm not going to go to bed yet. So it's calming, but also a little bit invigorating. So I'm going to put my head over, and then I'm going to cover the whole thing with the towel. I also have a hanky nearby because my nose is probably going to get runny. And then I'm going to put the towel over my head, and I'm going to breathe slowly and as deep as I can, while also being mindful that it is steam and I don't want to burn my face or my nasal passage or my mouth. So this is what it looks like.
Just letting the library group know, I had tried this as well. And like you said, the smell even too, it's just, it's a nice relaxing moment.
Yeah, it's really already like my face is dewy and I'm calmer and I'm able to just, you're literally inside of a little steam tent. It's like everything else falls away. It's extremely relaxing and enjoyable. Oh, I forgot to do the thing that I wanted to do, which was to take water out of the pot and use it to make the hot packs. But I'll just use the hot water from the kettle, which I actually have over here. So that's how you do the time steam. And you can keep this water on and rewarm it if you're like, sometimes my partner and I will do time steam and we'll kind of like trade off back and forth and the water will get cool and there won't be as much steam. So you just step away, turn it on real quick, let it heat back up, turn it off, add a little bit more time, and then keep going. You can also,
did you say how long it's a good idea? And I do remember in your book you said to really breathe in deep.
yeah, really breathe slowly and breathe deeply. And it's good to do it for like 10 minutes off and on. You can come back to it. But it's nice to kind of do it for a round of like 5 or 10 breaths. Then you need a break, you can walk away and have some water or tea, and then you come back and do a little bit more. And then when you're done, you can drink the tea, provided you haven't like sweated into it or something else. But I do drink it when it's done. It's delightful to add honey to. It's super earthy and grounding. You can also use it to cook with later. You can easily just strain it off and save it. So that's a time steam. And then I'm gonna make, so I heated this water earlier and I have a mug. I'm going to, let me move this out of the way so that I can show you again what's happening. I'm navigating this new kitchen, so thanks for sticking with me. Let's see here. This can go over here. After we're done with this call, I'm going to resume doing time steam because it was so nice. And now I'm like, I haven't done it in a few weeks. And I think in my transition of moving to Florida, I'm like, oh, you have to do new things because you're in this new place with new plants. And it's like, no, just do the time-tested remedies that work for you. Okay, so I have two tea packs. I'm just going to brew them. I'm going to brew them into 2 mugs so that later we can enjoy tea. What you want to do with these is really just get them all wet. And yeah, that's warm. So I'm using just water that was boiled probably like 30 minutes before we started talking. So it's still warm, but it's not boiling because you're going to put these on your eyes and the skin around your eyes is very delicate and sensitive. So you don't want to prepare the bags in boiled water and then immediately put them on. So I'm going to let these steep a little bit so that I actually have a good cup of chamomile tea when it's done. And in the meantime, we can talk about chamomile. So chamomile is an effective remedy for all kinds of stuff. And I think it's one plant that most of us can find almost anywhere. It was in bodegas and corner stores in New York City. It's in most grocery stores. Many people have it growing outside. It grew wild in the, I guess like more feral. It escaped from a previous planting all over the organic farm that I worked in Virginia. So it's ubiquitous. And I think there's a tendency to see something that's there all the time and be like, oh, it can't be that powerful, or it must not be a big deal. But in fact, like, because it's everywhere, that's how important it is to us. That's how important it was to people. People worked really hard to bring it with them all over the world, including to this country. So it's an excellent remedy. Chamomile tea is a great digestive remedy. It soothes the sensitive tissues in our gastrointestinal tract. So it's great to have around during the holidays if you're eating more fatty foods, trying things that are new to you. It's super helpful to have chamomile around. It gets a little bit demulcent as it brews, and that's what's soothing to our sensitive soft tissue in our digestive tract. It's also what's called a nervine or a nervine, which means it's soothing to our nervous system. And it is not sedating, but because it's relaxing to our nervous system, it does assist in sleep. So it's a helpful plant to have like an hour before you plan to go to bed so that you can go to the bathroom before you fall asleep, because what's the point of helping yourself get to sleep if you just have to wake up 2 hours later to go to the bathroom? So make sure you're drinking it with time enough to go to the bathroom before you go to bed. And I really love a combination of chamomile and peppermint in the evening. If you like to combine herbs at home, then I do like 2 parts of chamomile and 1 part of peppermint, and I keep it in a little glass jar. And then I use about a little bit more than a teaspoon per cup before I go to bed. Okay, so these are brewed. I'm going to need a little plate. So it's helpful to have a little plate nearby. Make sure your hands are clean. I haven't touched anything but the stuff that we're using. So I'll show you down here. There we go. Okay, so I'm taking the bag out and I'm pulling the string off because that's going to be annoying, hitting my face. These are actually, one is a chamomile bag and one is chamomile and lavender. I would not use chamomile and peppermint on your eyes. It might be a little bit irritating, but chamomile and lavender will be fine. And so as I drink my tea, I can lay in my bed and have a little spa night and just literally put the tea packs on your eyes, which is what I'm going to try and do for you right now. And it's going to drip down your face a little bit. But if you put a towel on your bed, then it'll be fine. It's so nice.
Well, there was a question, if you really dislike chamomile, you don't have it in your house as much. Is there another type of tea? Now you were saying you have lavender with you in one of them and not to use peppermint, but are there other things that would maybe do something similar?
Yeah. There's marshmallow root is also very soothing. You can buy the root from Mountain Rose Herbs or Frontier Herbs, or let's see what else. I can't remember what the other one is, but marshmallow root has similar positive effects for your digestive system. Another plant that I like for my eyes is red clover, and that's a very nutritive tea to drink. Let's see what other plants would be good. I kind of want to look in my, I'm going to look in my herb thing and see what else is in there. Let's see. This is my herb cabinet. They're all in jars. I don't know if you can see them. Okay. So one that I was like, oh yeah, linden. Linden is also good for nighttime. It's a nervine. It'll help calm you before going to sleep. And then another one, I'll go back to where the light is better. Hold on.
Now, would you recommend drinking these like in teas or? Yeah.
I said earlier, like a teaspoon of dried chamomile to a teacup. If you're making them at home from loose tea, you can just use like a thin cotton towel. Put the herbs, I would probably actually do like a tablespoon of herbs into the cotton towel and twist, or a nut milk bag or cheesecloth. And you can use linden, which has also similar properties to chamomile. It's going to be soothing to your digestive tract and also to the soft tissue around your eyes. And it is a nervine. And then there's also calendula flowers, which these are whole calendula flowers. So just crumble these up into the cheesecloth or tea towel, and then dunk them in your mugs of tea, and then use those little packs on your eyes. Yeah, if you have an apothecary nearby, you can probably get linden and calendula from them. It's maybe if you have a health food store, then you'll probably be able to get them pre-packaged. But another thing I love to do is to buy bulk herbs and then share them with people that I love. So if you're like, why do I need to buy a pound of nettle or a pound of calendula? Because you can package it up and share it with your friends and tell them how to use it. And have them buy another pound of something else, and then you can all share. You can do the same thing with essential oils. I think people get intimidated by like acquiring the things they need in order to do herbalism. And herbalism always works better when we do it in community, because that's what we're doing with plants, is forming a partnership. So as many people that we can bring into our practice as possible means that we're sharing resource and the burden of whatever, the economic burden, and then we're also learning together. And so that's really great.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Hi. Do you want me to wait until the end?
No, that's okay. I was going to say that there was another question in the chat, but I'll ask it after.
I was just wondering, because you're saying about the teas, obviously, that they assist with your digestive tract and to help set a balance within your digestive system. Now, when you're putting these on your eyes, the only thing I can think of, like days of yore with the cucumbers in the bags, is this to, anti-inflammatory? I mean, is that the sole purpose? And do different herbs have different effects for different types of skins or things like that? I'm just trying to understand the whole eye thing.
Yeah. So if we're using things like chamomile, linden, and calendula, they're anti-inflammatory and vulnerary to the soft tissues around our eyes. So if you've had anything like a sty or an eye infection, or your eyes are puffy from eating too much salt, or you had an allergic reaction or an insect bite, or you're tired, then I mentioned earlier volatile oils, and chamomile has a lot of those. And part of the effect of the aromatic elements of a plant is, and particularly something like chamomile, is that their scents diffuse. And so if we're experiencing any of those upsets with our eyes, then it's also likely that we have stress and anxiety around it too. So you're doing double duty of soothing the infection or the bite or the effect of an allergic or, just disruptive reaction. And then you're also getting the benefit of the smell to help you relax and to calm down, because that will help your body fight the infection better. Or the inflammation, whatever the cause.
Okay, and then so the question that I saw in the chat was asking about where to buy herbs. As I was saying to you before, I mean, I was at a farmer's market, and there was somebody there that you could buy it from. Right now, a lot of stores are closed. A lot of the apothecaries, like there was one up in Nyack, that's now closed. So I'm guessing online seems to probably be a way to go right now, or I don't know.
Yeah, so there are some big herb companies in the United States that you can buy from: Mountain Rose Herbs, Frontier Co-op, and I think it's called Pacific Botanicals. Most of them are based in the Pacific Northwest, and they do source their plants all over the world, but they do tell you where they come from and whether or not they're organic. I do want to encourage everyone to support local apothecaries if they're still open. They've been hit super hard, and many of them have had to close. I run a group on Patreon, which is, I don't know if people have heard of Patreon, but I publish basically like resource guides every month. And so part of that project is to accumulate local purveyors for people. So if you join that group, that's one of the projects that we're working on, is putting lists of growers or producers or sellers of herbs from all over the United States, because there are lots of farmers who are also growing medicinal plants. Zach Wood's farm in Vermont sells medicinal plants online, and there are many others. And there are also, I'm not sure if farmers markets are open where you are, but like you said, Linda, herbalists or farmers are often selling perennial and annual medicinal plants that they grow and culinary herbs. And then also sometimes farmers are selling like the weeds that are nutrient dense, like chickweed or nettle or dandelion leaf. So you can keep your eyes out there if any of the farmers you know are doing a CSA delivery or just selling at the market.
Okay, and there was the question about the actual spelling of Patreon, but I think it's Patreon. Is that
Yep,
correct?
that's it.
Okay, thank you, Nicole, for that.
Yeah.
Okay, and somebody else was also mentioning Atlantic Spice Co. in Cape Cod. But maybe, Christine, when this is over, if maybe if you want to email me some of the information too, I'd be happy to pass
Sure.
it along, or whatever, you know, the groups that you were working with as well, just to, like I said, anybody that's here today, I think we're all a little herbal curious and kind of want to learn a little more.
Yeah, this is a great season too. I was talking to two friends, one who lives in Detroit and another who lives in New York earlier this week. And they're like, one has a small child, the other one is single, and everyone's thinking about what this winter is going to be like. It is a great time to pick up a new hobby, especially one that helps you take care of yourself and feel more connected to the world around you, which is herbalism. It's a great time. My book's a great introduction. There are so many more books. I'm sure Linda has lots of them at the library. It's going to be a long winter. Like, I think there's no point in sugarcoating it, but it can be easier with support, and plants are a great place to look. You'll learn new skills. You'll learn about lots of plants. You'll get to experiment and mess up and be like, oh, well, I'll start over again. It's totally fun. It's just like a party in your kitchen all the time.
Now, speaking of kitchen, because a lot of us have been experimenting with cooking, and there was also a question in the chat too, a lot of the herbs that we've been using in cooking and incorporating them in, like I know in your book too, same too, like rosemary was another one that has a lot of other properties outside of what we're just using it for cooking.
Yeah. So rosemary is one of my favorite plants, especially for like clarity of mind and focus. I want to talk about growing plants at home too, so don't let me forget about that. But there's a recipe in my book for a very simple tea of rosemary and orange, which is like one of my favorite drinks this time of year, and I can't wait to use Florida citrus to make it. It's one of my most favorite remedies to have in the afternoon when I'm feeling a little bit sluggish and like brain foggy and cloudy. It helps me to stay focused without the stimulation of caffeine. And so it's great for our brains. It also has a lot of volatile oils, so it's very soothing to drink. And this time of year, it's very helpful in the digestion of fats. So rosemary is a great plant to have around, dried or fresh. And then other culinary herbs. Parsley is not in my book, but it's super nutrient dense and very harmonizing to flavors in many meals. Let's see, we talked about thyme. Garlic is super important to our immune system. It has a long tradition of being used in recipes for remedies for illness. It's like, it's in Four Thieves oil. It has to do with the plague. It was often on shit. Like, people have taken it everywhere in order to help support their immune systems. Raw garlic especially. Don't eat raw garlic on an empty stomach. You will vomit. It's terrible. I know, because I've tried. So make sure that you're eating raw garlic with food, but raw garlic is definitely more potent than cooked. And there's also a recipe in my book for garlic honey, which is a fermented honey, which is not only supportive to our gut microbiome, but also helpful for our immune system. And especially if you have something like a little scratchy sore throat, even honey by itself, if you notice a tingle in your throat, just start with the honey. It's really soothing. It has lots of vitamins and minerals that we need. Yeah.
And then how about cilantro? Somebody was asking, was there any other properties of cilantro?
I have, not that I know of. That doesn't mean that there aren't. It's not, cilantro is not like part of my personal tradition. So I'm unsure of when people, for whom cilantro is part of their ancestral tradition, use it medicinally. But that, I mean, that would be, it would be a great place to investigate. I know, I mean, my idea is that it's carminative, is that it helps in digestion, because of the spiciness and the volatile oils, and because of the foods that I know we usually go alongside it, like beans or meat. And my hunch is that cilantro helps with the digestion.
Well, as you said before, you're always learning, right? So
Yeah.
and learning from others. Okay, and then 2 more questions in the chat. What was about sweet, I'm probably going to say this wrong, sweet marjoram?
Uh-huh.
The other one was, what herbs are good to use to prevent getting a cold or the flu? Which
Yeah, sweet marjoram is like in the same group as oregano. It's a great respiratory herb. You can use it in place of thyme in the thyme steam that we just did. You can do thyme, you can do oregano, you can do marjoram, you can do bee balm, which is also known as monarda. They're all really great for respiratory gunk and supporting our respiratory system. Herbs that are good used to prevent getting a cold or the flu: drinking lots of water, eating lots of supportive and nutritive broths that incorporate things like garlic, onions, thyme, seaweeds, mushrooms. If you eat animals, then the bones from organically raised animals. Don't make broth out of animals of unknown origin. If they've been given tons of antibiotics or live on a farm where there's lots of chemicals, all of that stuff is in their bones and it'll be leached into the water when you make it. So be mindful of that. And then it's great to have, you know, Echinacea is a plant that lots of people refer to and they're like, I'm going to take my Echinacea when I'm sick. Echinacea is a plant that you take before you get sick. So that's like the cool thing about herbalism too, is that you learn which plants you take at which time. Some plants we take before there's ever an indication of getting sick, like garlic, and we can take that throughout the course of an illness. There are other plants that we take before we get the cold or the flu, like Echinacea. Once we get the cold or flu, we switch to something like elderberry, and then we take different plants at the end, depending on the experience of our symptoms, to help us repair and reset and get the nutrients back in our system that we need in order to get back to the place we were before we got sick. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to talk about, is that good? Should I talk more about cold and flu?
No, I think that's good. And I like that everybody's asking in the chat, but again, if they want to unmute themselves, because there was another one, what adaptogenic herbs are good to grow? And I think that's what you were just about to talk about too, about growing. We were talking before about, we're experimenting with growing inside now.
Yeah, so you can grow most culinary plants inside. The thing that happens with growing plants indoors is that you're just going to have to replace them more often. They will die quickly. That's not because you're doing anything wrong necessarily. They just don't have it. Like, plants want to grow outside. That's just where they want to be. Except for plants that do really well indoors happen to be more tropical plants that live in low light natural environments, right? That's why we have like rubber plants and calla lilies and all these tropical plants that became popularized during the Victorian period, because they did well in low light situations. So stuff like parsley and basil and cilantro and chives and rosemary and lavender, anything that you might use in a culinary application, are sun-loving plants. So it's important that they live somewhere in your house where they get enough sun. That's hard to do in the wintertime. They might die sooner than you expect. Just replace them. Compost them, get a new plant. Don't beat yourself up about it. Adaptogenic herbs are the only one that I think you can grow pretty well at home and in a container is called ashwagandha, and you use the root of ashwagandha. It's not the leaves, it's not the flowers. And if you can grow tomatoes, you can grow ashwagandha. Lots of people grow, let's see, what else do people grow in their yards? I think ashwagandha is the best thing to grow at home. Most other adaptogenic herbs besides, let's see, Tulsi is also really great to grow at home. Trying to think of what else I've grown at home. I think Tulsi and ashwagandha are your best bets for growing adaptogenic herbs at home. And Tulsi is in the basil family. So if you're familiar with growing basil, then you'll grow Tulsi the same way. It loves sun, doesn't do super great in dampness. And those are both plants from the Ayurvedic tradition. So lots of plants get popularized as adaptogens, but not that many plants actually are adaptogens. It's a very specific definition of what an adaptogen is. If you want to know more about adaptogens, David Winston's book is a really great resource. He's one of my teachers and he's extremely knowledgeable. And I think actually they just released a second edition of the book. So it's like now super up to date. That's a great resource for learning more about adaptogens. If you don't know what I'm talking about adaptogens, and it's possible that lots of you don't know what they are.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, the short answer. So adaptogens were researched by the Russians, I think in the 1930s. They were curious about any substance that could enhance activity, basically. But the short answer of what an adaptogenic herb is that it's a plant that helps us adapt to stress. But what's interesting about adaptogenic plants is that they help us adapt to stress through a very specific system in our body, which is the HPA axis. So they work on a very specific level to help our bodies deal with stress and to adapt to stress, and then to also overcome it. So David's book, we could have a whole class about adaptogens. We could have a whole month-long course on adaptogens. David's book is really great. You could read it this winter. It would be a great way to pass your time. Herbs that are beneficial to your circulatory system. Yes, it depends on excuse me, I'm glad I have my water here with elderberry syrup in it to help me continue to speak. So the cool thing about herbalism is that we in general try not to think about plants as like the cold and flu herb or the circulatory system herb or whatever, the depression plant. Like there are lots of plants that, like St. John's wort is popularly known as the depression plant. But plants really work with people, not diseases. So it depends on what person has what circulatory issue. So with that in mind, I will also say, thinking about plants that are in the book, and then also this time of year, one of my favorite cardiotonic herbs, which is a plant that works to tone the circulatory system, to keep it healthy, to help it work well, is Hawthorne Tree. And Hawthorne, is also likely growing in New Jersey. The berries are traditionally what's used, and they're not out this time of year, but you can get dried. So Hawthorne is a great plant for your cardiovascular system. But then also this time of year, what's happening in our circulatory systems, if we happen to have a circulatory system that runs into trouble, like mine, like I happen to have I was like, I'm going to call it a weak circulatory system, but I don't know if that's necessarily fair. I get cold fingers and toes like all the time. they're even a little bit chilly right now, and it's like 73 degrees in my house. Ginger is my favorite plant for moving circulation in the body, specifically out from the center and into the periphery. I like to make a simple tea this time of year of about an inch of sliced ginger root, half a lemon sliced, and a little pinch of cayenne. I do that in like a 4-cup teapot. Cover it to keep the volatile oils in, let it steep for about like at least 10 minutes. There's lots of really good bitter activity in the pith of a lemon. So it's nice to let that come out in the tea so that everything's not so tart. There's also a little bit of bitter to balance it. And then I add honey. And I like to have that to help move my blood from the center of my body, because especially in winter, that's what's happening now, is our systems have evolved to protect the most precious organs in our body, which live in the center of our body. Our hands and our feet are not so important to our survival. So we have to remind our body to move the blood back out to the ends, especially if we're going to be outside in the cold. And lots of us are going to we're going to have to go outside. We're going to have to figure out how to go outside. I read a great tweet thread from a musher in Alaska who was talking about all the garments she uses to stay warm outside. It was super, I'll include that. It was a super helpful article about just like how trapping air to keep warm works. So that's an important thing that we have to do. And then also be drinking teas that help to move our blood so that we can stay warm when we're exposed to the elements. And ginger is my favorite for that. Someone says, where can we find your book? I'm selling my book on my website. I still have some copies. And
I mean, the library does have a copy. There's not as many right now in our Buckle system. And I even think I saw it was it on Amazon? I think so, right? Or no, maybe.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's on my website and my publisher. I'm pretty sure my publisher is still doing free shipping, which is on, which is Roost Books. And if your local bookstore is still open, they'll order it for you. That's my preference.
The name of your website. People are asking, but I will send a follow-up email with this as well. But people were asking about the name of your website.
Yeah, my website is just my name, Christine C. Buckley. I'm like, has it been updated in a while? I don't know.
You did move.
Yeah, we went through a moving into time of COVID is a very interesting experience. So
thank you. Nicole put the website up on.
Thanks, Nicole.
Now, see, I told you she's a good one to have.
Yeah.
And then if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask another question, or if you're herbal curious as well, or something that you've been hearing about but didn't quite know how to use. Yep. Now the group is quiet.
Yeah. One last thing I will say is like get to know the plants that are in your kitchen. Like after we're done tonight, maybe take a look in your spice cabinet and see what you haven't opened in a while. And if you have spice blends or just like spices that you're like, oh, what's that? Take a little bit of time and look them up. Know that if they're in your kitchen, they're likely safe to use. You can overdo it with things like cinnamon and licorice, but it takes quite a bit in order to overdo it. But be confident that the things that you have in your kitchen are safe to experiment with.
And then somebody was asking about lemon and honey water as a potential for helping us lose weight, or I guess maybe it makes you fuller?
I don't know. I have no idea.
But drinking water is always good for you. So
yeah, drinking water is always good for you. Always, always, always. That's your cells are mostly made of water, and they're going to work better if we're feeding them by drinking water all day.
I have a quick question again.
Sure.
I also remember clove for toothaches and things like that. Yes. I mean, I'm not familiar with the book. I'm sorry, I haven't seen it yet, but do you have a breakdown of what what herbs are good for what uses and things like that?
Yeah, my book does not have clove in it, but clove is analgesic and anodyne, so it's super great for toothaches and also good to put in honey if you're having a sore throat and you need to numb it out a little bit. And clove, if anyone's ever cooked with clove, you know that you need very little in order to taste it, so keep that in mind. I like to say about salt, you can always add more. It's way harder, nearly impossible to take it away. And the same is true for strong tasting plants. You can always add more.
Could you say anything about Arnica? My daughter's school, she was in Waldorf school for a very long time, and Arnica was applied as a tea, as a salve, as an ointment, as a everything.
Yeah.
If you could just talk a little bit about where it comes from and how it's used and what
Yeah.
it's good
Arnica is a traditionally used as a wound healer and as a muscle healer. So you're most likely to buy it in the store infused in an oil. And then it's applied topically to bruises, sore muscles, healing sprains, or you don't apply it to an open wound. That's important to know about when you're thinking about topical applications of plants. It's good to know which ones can go on an open wound and which kinds of wounds and which shouldn't. But I used Arnica. I got in a really bad bike accident a couple years ago. And I had nothing got broken, but I had terrible bruising, and Arnica oil really made it heal faster and relieved the pain. Yeah.
And then I got a question. Oh, yeah. What's your favorite herb and why in the chat?
That's a good question. I really love all plants, but the one,
right?
huh?
It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm really fond of dandelion. It's on the cover of my book. I love it. I think it's so cheery and so generous, and I think it's an excellent lesson in the tendency we have as humans to overlook the good stuff we have in our immediate surroundings, and the mistakes we make in interacting with our environment. Like, dandelion is a really incredible plant. It's all parts of it are medicinal. It's incredibly resilient. It's like, thinking about it and like holding it in my mind right now actually makes me a little bit emotional. Like, I think particularly for this time, it's a very appropriate plant to think about how we work together as communities and what it means to survive and, to fight for each other. So I just really love dandelion, and it's delicious. I love dandelion leaf in my salads. I like to cook dandelion. I love making dandelion honey and flowers from the tincture. And the roots are so great for our digestive systems and for the organs in our body that help us to eliminate waste and to care for our bodies in the environments in which we live. So it's everywhere.
Dandelion tea is particularly good for flushing out your liver and things like that, right?
Yeah, and it's diuretic, so it helps to support waste clearing, and it's everywhere. It's like, so it makes such a big difference too if you have time this winter to get a field guide and to start familiarizing yourself with what certain plants look like, so that when they come back in the spring, you know that you're surrounded by friends. It makes a really big difference toward the end of March, the beginning of April, where like things are just starting to come out, where you're like, I know what that is, and to kind of notice so that next year you know where to look, because it's going to be a long period of time without any green, unless you have evergreens around, in which case they're great friends too. Oh, what's my favorite herb? Oh, that's what we just talked about.
I think that's it for our questions. Do we have any other questions? Well, I do want to say thank you so much, Christine. I know other people, they didn't necessarily get the book beforehand, but it is informative. And to learn what's in our cabinets, like you were saying, just go look in our spice cabinets. We may not be able to see the herbs outside right now, but we will definitely all be staring, I think, at our cabinets for quite some time. And to learn how we can use them in different ways. It's really a helpful thing.
Yeah, you have all winter to get to know everything around you. It's going to be great.
So thank you very much. I am going to stop recording this right now.